age of dinosaurs.
Some were big, some fast, some incredibly strong, some amazingly smart. All were ferocious, the deadliest predators of prehistory. Living at different times in different places, being at home in different environments, they nevertheless shared an uncommon ability. The ability to hunt so powerfully and skillfully that they could dominate their landscape. Long gone from the earth, they are still part of it. Part of its dim, distant past, and by virtue of their hold on modern imaginations, part of its present. Of its birth to the present day, nothing on Earth has been permanent. Nothing. Still, across the eons of Earth's existence, for all the impermanence, all the change, there are certain constants. One is that animals prey on other animals. Some of these predators have been really good at it. Many of the best of them lived in a remote time known as prehistory. Prehistory is the domain of paleontologists. Their quest is one scientists have been making for a long time. They seek fossils of plants and animals to help them piece together the puzzle of the Earth's past. Fossils of virtually any plant or animal will do, but among the most fascinating are fossils of the great predators, hunters through the ages. Long before the age of dinosaurs dawned, superb predators walked the earth. Dimetrodon was one. A sail-backed creature, it terrorized the planet 280 million years ago. Once, it ruled an area near Fort Worth, Texas, called the Texas Redbeds. Back then, the Redbeds were a wet and fertile place. Dr. Nicholas Houghton of the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., has been studying animals like Dimetrodon for years. He believes the sail was used to regulate its body temperature.
The sail probably functioned as both a radiator and a heat absorber. As a heat absorber, it would allow an animal to warm up faster than the animals were not so equipped. And if it was a predator, it'd get going after lunch more quickly. If it were prey, it could get out of the way faster. And so it probably got pretty hot, too. And this would be a problem with an animal as big as Dimetrodon. And to get rid of excess heat, it would simply turn so that the sail was parallel with the rays of the sun, and its higher temperature would then be radiated off into the air, and it could cool off.
Maverick paleontologist Robert Bacher doesn't agree.
The people who want to make anything sticking out of the body a cooling mechanism should watch more animals in a zoo. Things that stick out of your head or stick out of your back are nearly always used first to intimidate rivals, sexual rivals. Second, maybe as a radiator. But the main reason for moose antlers or finbacks is to intimidate your rivals.
If there is disagreement about the sail's function, most scientists agree about this. Dimetrodon and its relatives represent a stage between cold-blooded reptiles and warm-blooded mammals. They're called proto-mammals, and according to paleontologist Tim Rowe, their teeth are proof of an amazing relationship.
An interesting point of resemblance between us and Dimetrodon is the dentition, the teeth. Dimetrodon has simple incisors, followed by a specialized canine and a series of teeth of different sizes that are specialized behind the canine. This feature is not something that we find very commonly distributed throughout the animal kingdom. In fact, it's really only found in one other group, in mammals. Mammals, like Dimetrodon, have a dentition that's made up of simple, specialized incisors, a canine. Of course, our canine's pretty small, but it's still a canine. And behind the canine are a series of specialized, differentiated teeth of different sizes that perform different functions than the teeth in the front of the jaw. This feature links us with Dimetrodon, like it or not. You could pick your friends, but you can't pick your relatives.
And Dimetrodon couldn't pick its relatives. It developed from a lizard-like creature called Ophiachodon. Ophiachodon gave rise to two lines of sailback reptiles. One, a small plant eater, turned out to be an evolutionary dead end. It died out. The other was Dimetrodon, the animal that so interests Tim Rowe. The simple, astounding truth is that from creatures like this fiercely predatory animal, all mammals evolved. That evolutionary road, however, was a rocky one. For millions of years, mammal-like reptiles grew, flourished, and diversified. Then, inexplicably, they began to disappear. Dinosaurs took over, pushing proto-mammals to the brink of extinction. Larger proto-mammals fell prey to the Earth's new kings. Smaller ones survived, essentially by being overlooked. With time, they evolved into full mammals, holding on to life in forms no larger than a rodent, hiding, waiting, and growing smarter as the age of dinosaurs unfolded.
This program is brought to you in part by Ernst
Of dinosaurs did. It was born in the period known as the Triassic, and for the next 150 million years, these terrible lizards would reign supreme on Earth. Not all dinosaurs were terrible, but those that were terrible really were. If they didn't invent predation, they certainly advanced it. And that got Hollywood's attention. The movies had their way with these creatures, offering fanciful renderings that usually had little to do with reality. That reality, however, was far more interesting than anything in films. It began with the most primitive dinosaur ever found, Eoraptor, the dawn thief. This was no gigantic monster. Its skull was smaller than a human hand, but it had claws and teeth to match a vicious attitude. Two-legged, carnivorous, versatile and moving across the ground, Dawn Thief was hardly the Earth's first predator. It was, however, an awfully good one. But good as it was, time would produce much improved dinosaur hunters. In Argentina's Valley of the Moon, paleontologists have uncovered a virtually complete skeleton of one of the first of such improvements, Wherrerasaurus. 17 feet long, weighing in at 500 pounds, it was far bigger and even nastier than Eoraptor. The skull, with its long, recurved, biting and grasping teeth, is clear evidence that this was a very active predator. The configuration of the fishhook-like teeth allowed Herrerasaurus to sink them in so its prey could not escape. The limbs were completely rotated under the body. The creature was bipedal. Its short arms had huge claws that grabbed and tore at prey. Both Eoraptor and Herrerasaurus stood upright. This set them apart from reptiles and freed their hands, no longer needed for locomotion, to grab something while on the run. Despite these similarities, differences between the two beasts were striking. Compared to the smaller Eoraptor, Herrerasaurus was an advanced model predator that operated on a far bigger scale. Its signature was a powerful jaw which clamped down on a struggling animal. This feature would be passed down the evolutionary line to future dinosaur predators. Those predators were legion. Over the millions upon millions of years dinosaurs ruled the planet, the carnivorous species kept becoming better, more efficient hunters, but not necessarily larger ones. For most of the dinosaur era, the majority of these animals were no larger than tigers. Toward the end of that era, however, some became huge and overpowering. Big as buildings, they were called carnosaurs. The domination of the carnosaurs reached its peak 65 million years ago. But the process that guaranteed this domination began 135 million years before that, when the supercontinent of Pangaea broke up. Newly forming mountain ranges and inland seas isolated dinosaurs into smaller and smaller groups. Geographic isolation and climatic variation are major evolutionary driving forces. They are responsible for greater diversity. As the Earth was being reconfigured, plants and animals adapted to their new environments by developing new survival strategies. Herbivorous dinosaurs were no exception. Ankylosaurus grew armor and a clubbed tail. Triceratops grew shields and large horns. And seismosaurs just grew into the largest land animal ever. For even more protection, some plant eaters formed herds. Paleontologist Phil Curry knows how predators responded.
The plant eaters are trying to get bigger and better arms so that they can protect themselves better against the meat eaters. But the meat eaters have to stay ahead in that arms race. They always have to be a little bit more intelligent, a little bit more faster, because if they're not, they won't eat.
And these creatures wanted to eat. So they kept up with their prey. They changed. Became, among other things, very much larger. It was a question of survival. Carnosaurs evolved into huge, fearsome animals. Though they may have lived in various places, been separated in time by millions of years, they were descendants of Eoraptor and Herrerasaurus, and they shared certain unmistakable characteristics. Balancing on three-toed, clawed feet. Slender arms for grasping. And the head, the remarkable head, itself an awesome weapon, encasing sharp teeth, and the engineering of a deadly double-hinged jaw. Finally, all these features, honed to chilling perfection, were incorporated into the greatest land predator of them all. T-Rex reverberates through time. Mother of all prehistoric predators, its odd incarnations are today evident everywhere. Plastic souvenir T-Rex teeth sell like hotcakes, and welders fashion model replicas to satisfy the public's tremendous fascination with the creature. It's a fascination that has been going strong since the turn of the 20th century. In 1900, Barnum Brown discovered the first T-Rex. His colleague at the American Museum of Natural History, Henry Osborn, named it Tyrannosaurus rex, Tyrant Lizard King. People already attracted to dinosaur fossils came in droves to view T-Rex. Those coming today are most likely to see not real T-Rex fossils, but instead models cast from the few existing Tyrannosaurus fossils. Until recently, only 9 incomplete specimens were available. All were found in badlands that stretch from Wyoming and Montana into South Dakota and Western Canada. When T-Rex lived, an inland sea split North America, trapping the animal in the western part of the continent. Still, based on what had been found, T-Rex gained its reputation for ferocity. But there are paleontologists who think T-Rex's reputation as a predator is overblown. Jack Horner is one.
When Tyrannosaurus rex was first found, Barnum Brown brought the specimen in. Henry Fairfield Osborn was the first person to work on it, or certainly the first one to describe it. And he gave it the name Tyrannosaurus rex, which means Tyrant Lizard King. Well, and pretty much said it was a predator, but he didn't base that on anything. I mean, he didn't really do the work necessary to determine that it was. He just pretty much said it was. It was a big carnivorous animal, the largest one ever found, and the assumption was that it was a predator.
Scientists like Jack Horner don't buy that assumption. They claim T-Rex was a scavenger, using its size to scare off competition for carrion.
People don't want to hear that Tyrannosaurus was a scavenger. They want to know that it was a predator, because for some reason that's really special.
But because people seem to have so much invested in T-Rex, the implacable, methodical killer, the notion that the beast may have been less is unpopular. According to paleontologist Phil Curry, the truth is probably somewhere in between.
The reality is that there really are no pure scavengers and there are no pure hunters. A lion will eat food that's already dead if it finds it, or it will take it down if it can't find dead food. Tyrannosaurus rex and the other theropod dinosaurs would have been in the same kind of position.
Phil Curry and others suggest T-Rex not only dined on the duckbill and horned dinosaurs that shared its landscape, it may not have been above attacking other T-Rexes. The controversy about the eating habits of this most famous of predators shows no sign of abating. Many argue this: how could a dinosaur, with a jaw strong enough to withstand the force of muscles capable of crushing any animal's bones, be anything but a first-rate predator? The reply is that the real issue is not T-Rex's jaws, but its arms. They were short, very short for a creature over 15 feet tall, no bigger than a man's. They couldn't reach the animal's mouth. They couldn't even reach one another. How could T-Rex use them to capture prey? Clearly, Allosaurus, an earlier dinosaur, had arms better suited to that task. But perhaps T-Rex's lofty predatory standing is best secured by its senses. Its hearing was keen, a significant aid in tracking. Its vision, unlike that of most dinosaurs, was stereoscopic, which made it easier to see movement. And, beyond all that, its sense of smell was acute. While arguments about whether T-Rex was a predator or scavenger go on, there is no argument that Tyrannosaurus rex was an imposing creature. Tall as 3 men, weighing up to 14,000 pounds, with a powerfully muscled jaw that held 9-inch teeth. It was the brawn of the dinosaur world. $67 million years ago, Troodon shared this part of the Earth with T-Rex. It weighed around 50 pounds and was a mere 6 feet tall, a runt compared to its enormous cousin. But Troodon had some very special advantages. It was fast. Taking enormous strides, it held its middle claws above the ground. Troodon had a long, highly flexible, whip-like tail, which may have enhanced its balance as it ran or leaped on its victim. The owner of sharp, serrated teeth, large hook-like claws, and unique among dinosaurs, an opposable finger that gave it a firm grasp on its prey. Fleet little Troodon was all predator. What really set it apart, though, was its intelligence. Troodon was, perhaps, the smartest dinosaur ever. Paleontologists know that the brains of most dinosaurs didn't fill their brain cavities. Troodon's was so large, it left impressions inside the skull.
They are so interesting because they are so highly evolved, so uncommon, so difficult to find, and so anatomically interesting. This dinosaur may be small, but its significance is very large. It was the first time that we realized that some dinosaurs had brains that were unusually large for reptiles, and that these creatures, the dinosaurs, were not a static group, they were evolving, and they were evolving towards higher levels of behavioral complexity.
Stegosaurus seems less complex. It weighed 6,000 pounds, but its brain weighed only slightly more than 2 ounces. Troodon, on the other hand, was over 100 times smaller than Stegosaurus. Its brain, however, weighed roughly 1.5 ounces. The fact is that when compared to its body size, Troodon's brain was about 6 times larger than that of most dinosaurs. Not only that, its brain-to-body size ratio outranked primitive mammals, the ancestors of human beings. But what did Troodon do with its brain power? It processed information from its highly developed senses, particularly its vision, which included better depth perception than other dinosaurs had. Troodon's eyes were large, an indication that it was a nocturnal predator. Quick, small, and cunning beyond anything alive at the time, Troodon stalked its swampy environment, eating plants, insects, and especially primitive mammals, whose sole refuge in a hostile world was the night. Darkness might have been their refuge from larger dinosaurs with poor night vision, but not from Troodon. It feasted on them with gusto, and it might have continued to do so for millions of years had something cataclysmic not happened. It was something that Troodon, for all its intelligence, and Tyrannosaurus rex, for all its size and strength, couldn't survive. It was the extinction. The extinction of the dinosaurs may have been the result of an asteroid 6 miles wide slamming into the planet and creating a worldwide firestorm. Some say that same asteroid was responsible for a tidal wave a half-mile high. Others claim the dust created by the asteroid's impact triggered torrents of acid rain strong enough to annihilate many plant and animal species. There is no shortage of theories about what happened to dinosaurs, and no agreement. Whatever happened, it cost them a world and made the ascent of mammals possible. Only this is certain. In the blink of a geologic eye, they were gone. With them went a long history filled with remarkable animals and some of the greatest predators that ever walked the earth. But those predators would be replaced by others. Others that didn't walk the earth at all. Today, the word shark is virtually synonymous with the word predator. But the shark, for all its hunting prowess, takes a back seat to creatures that dominated the world's oceans in prehistory. The waters were replete with such creatures. At virtually the same time dinosaurs ruled the land, the seas were theirs. Ichthyosaur, meaning fish lizard, was the first. It had a jaw full of sharp teeth, eyes big as cantaloupes for hunting at twilight or in dark waters, and could move through the ocean in bursts of speed up to 45 miles per hour. Ichthyosaurs came in a variety of sizes, from small as a salmon to large as a whale. Early on, ichthyosaurs had the sea's bounty almost to themselves. It was a movable feast. A measure of their success is the simple fact that they adapted to change by changing themselves. Over millions of years, they discarded their stocky reptilian shape and became sleeker, more streamlined, bullet-shaped, built for speed, much like the modern bottlenose dolphin. They had to, because they were no longer alone. Other reptiles, escaping land wars with dinosaurs, were finding the water hospitable. They brought with them new ways of hunting and killing. 190 million years ago, plesiosaurs went swimming. Weighing 5 tons, big-eyed, small-headed, and having 4 flippers, which must have made them remarkably fast and maneuverable, plesiosaurs have been divided into 12 species. Those with short necks were called pliosaurs. Some of them became incredibly big. Kronosaur was the biggest. 130 million years ago, it attained a length of 50 feet. Its head was 12 feet. Its jaws could engulf a cow. Others grew long, very long. Elasmosaurus extended 60 feet, 40 of them neck. It could simply strike out and ambush its prey. A real match for Plesiosaurus was a species called Mosasaur, which also came in a variety of shapes and sizes. Its champion, though, was a 40-foot monster designed for speed and hunting. This was the T-Rex of the sea, Mosasaurus maximus. Beyond being equipped with sharp, long, pointed teeth, Mosasaurus had double-hinged jaws that not only could open very wide, but could momentarily dislocate to bite off huge chunks of flesh or to swallow prey whole. As if that wasn't enough, inside its skull, there was an additional set of teeth. This was the whole package. Moving through the water like an eel, diving to 100 feet, it devoured whatever it wanted. But like dinosaur predators on land, it just disappeared near the end of the Cretaceous period, 65 million years ago. And again, no one really knows why. Naturally, there are theories. One of the most interesting suggests that 75 million years ago, a mysterious catastrophe shattered the ocean's delicate ecosystem. Plankton was no longer abundant. Consequently, the numbers of fish and squid declined. The large seagoing reptiles that had fed so well on them for so long no longer could. They literally starved to death. The waters were now open to a bigger and deadlier predator than any before it. Although shark evolution began 400 million years ago, it was 25 million years ago that a relative of today's great white shark, only much, much larger, took center stage and kept it. Called Megalodon, its fossils have been found all over the world. Dr. Michael Gottfried has been hunting them on the shores of the Chesapeake Bay.
The megalodon, or the megatooth shark, as we sometimes like to call it, grew to over probably about 50 feet in length. We estimate from the size of the teeth on the megalodon, comparing them to the size of the living type of great white shark, that it reached at least 52 feet in length and probably something over 50 tons. In human terms, that's about the size and about as big around as a Greyhound bus, and about the weight of about 7 or 8 Tyrannosaurus rex dinosaurs.
Megalodon's teeth were 6 inches long and 5 inches at the base.
Megalodon teeth are incredibly sharp. And not only do they have a very sort of razor-sharp edge right along the tooth, but they're serrated like a steak knife. So not only could they slice just because of the sharpness of the edge, but they could saw back and forth with this serrated edge to cut through meat and even bone. And they found the tips of these bits of these teeth broken off in whalebone. So we know that they were capable of biting right through the skin, right through all the muscle, right into the bone.
Megalodon's jaw measured almost 6 feet. In one gulp, it could swallow something large as a human being. Why did these prehistoric sharks grow so large? Perhaps because they fed on large animals, like dolphins and whales. The truth is, the answer may never be found. Sharks are mostly cartilage, which doesn't fossilize. Teeth and vertebrae do, and they provide the few remains of the monstrous megalodon. They don't, however, reveal what happened to this long-ago ancestor of today's shark. Paleontologists believe they may have died out some 2 million years ago, gone the way of the other great predators of the deep that in their day held dominion over the Earth's oceans. The sky is where most birds are at home, free to soar and dip and do what humans have always dreamed of doing: fly. In the modern world, birds, by and large, are gentle creatures. They represent no threat, nothing to be afraid of. In prehistory, it was quite a different story. Does the name Andalgalornis mean anything? Probably not. Unlike T-Rex, Andalgalornis doesn't dot the geography of the imagination. But if this beast is not familiar, it should be. Andalgalornis was no pigeon. Rather, it was the most feared predator of its time and place. Not reptile or mammal. Andalgalornis was a bird, a killer bird. Birds appeared about 150 million years ago. Archaeopteryx, the oldest known species, was the size of a magpie, hardly awe-inspiring. Archaeopteryx, however, could do something nothing else on Earth could do. It could fly, and so could most of its descendants, but not all. Like today's ostriches, Andalgalornis couldn't lift off the ground. In exchange for that inability, it got the power to kill. With a skull longer than a horse's, with a razor-sharp beak, Andalgalornis was a terrifying predator, standing 5 feet tall and weighing 250 pounds. It lived in what would become the Badlands of Argentina. Then, though, South America was very different. The Andes Mountains hadn't risen. The continent, a seemingly endless windswept plain, was a great isolated island on which flesh-eating birds, like Andalgalornis, became the top predators. Killer birds evolved in South America 25 million years ago, and with no competition from predatory mammals, ruled the roost for 20 million years. Called Forus racoids, South America's killer birds came in several species, ranging in size from medium to gigantic. They had beaks that sliced through bone and jaws that simply crushed it. Andalgalornis made a modern hawk look like an insect. And Onyctornis, another killer, was twice as big as Andalgalornis. Its skull was more than 3 feet long. These birds had their choice of prey. The enormous Megatherium, 10 times bigger than a modern sloth. The odd Glyptodon, the size of a small car and armored like a tank, and a host of other tasty morsels. Prehistory's flightless predator birds were fast, just as modern emus and ostriches are. They could reach 40 miles an hour and used this speed in combination with surprise to hunt successfully. But not all prehistoric birds were earthbound. Some could fly. Indeed, the largest of them, the largest bird ever, could take to the air. Today, the condor is the world's largest bird. The sky over Argentina is its home. The same sky that was once home to Argentavis magnificens, wingspan 27 feet, weight 170 pounds. How did this bird get off the ground? Perhaps as its distant relative, the condor does. It stands up, unfolds its wings, faces the wind, and waits for a gust to help it lift off. For Argentavis, that would have had to be some gust. Once the great bird was airborne, everything below was a target. Argentavis would swoop down, carry off its prey, and swallow it whole. The beginning of the end for South America's huge predator birds came when their continent collided with North America, roughly 3 million years ago. The collision formed a land bridge, which brought competition south. And over time, the land, climate, and vegetation radically changed. Prey became scarce, then disappeared. Many giant predator birds, like Andalgalornis, did too. But some used the bridge as an escape route to the north. One was the 6-foot Titanus walleri. Bob Chandler has found fossils of this bird in the waters of Florida's Santa Fe River.
Scuba diving has to be one of the more exotic and fascinating standpoints of my research because, in fact, here I am underwater trying to excavate and take good data, producing many thousands of fossils for my own and other research. Sometimes you actually lose track of time while you're collecting these important bone beds, and you're looking for more and more fossils.
The Titanus walleri fossils Chandler found told him the bird was even bigger than Andalgalornis. But more remarkable was the revelation that Titanus and other flightless killer birds had evolved wings different from those of any other bird living or extinct.
This is the fused hand bones.
Wings that had been modified to act as powerful arms capable of holding prey down.
Is that it now has a flatted proximal end, which would not allow the bone to be tucked back under the ulna radius or the lower limb bone.
So it was their unique wings, unable to provide them flight, that actually helped them become such lethal predators. For Titanus walleri, the migration north bought time. It learned to compete with mammalian predators, and thus was able to survive its southern brethren by 2 million years. But in the end, it too succumbed and ended the remarkable saga of the killer birds. There are few things on earth cute as a kangaroo. Symbols of the island continent of Australia, these animals, while they have a reputation as boxers, or at least kickboxers, are generally thought of as quaint, cuddly, and sometimes comical. Never aggressive or predatory. But deep in prehistory, not all kangaroos were the gentle creatures alive today. Deep in prehistory, there was a different kind of kangaroo hopping around. Call them killer kangaroos. Millions of years ago, these flesh-eaters roamed Australia's plains, armed with rapier teeth, voracious appetites, and a disposition just the opposite of their modern cousins. Like those cousins, ancient kangaroos were marsupial mammals. Their young grew in the mother's pouch. The basic resemblance between past and present kangaroos ended right there. Predator kangaroos stood about 5 feet tall and were burlier than the modern version. Sharp-toothed, they almost certainly used their incisors to stab their prey. Discovering evidence of this kind of behavior was a shock to paleontologist Michael Archer, who found the fearsome skeleton in the kangaroo closet.
Here's an assortment of the sorts of things that we're finding in Riverslade about 20 million years ago. One of the ones that just blew our mind right in the beginning was a thing that ought to be a representative of one of the gentlest, cutest sort of groups, a kangaroo. This thing, this offense to the senses, was a flesh-eating kangaroo.
The landscape of prehistory, especially the landscape of prehistoric Australia, and surprise, surprise, prehistoric South America, is strewn with carnivorous marsupials that are eerily reminiscent of contemporary animals, familiar animals. This saber-toothed marsupial terrorized South America with fangs that could have been 6 or 7 inches long. This boar hyaenid, the size of a grizzly bear, ate whatever it wanted. Predators like these flourished in South America for some 60 million years. By 2 million years ago, though, they were all but gone, outcompeted by placental mammals, ferocious saber-toothed cats and great bears whose young grew not in a pouch, but in the mother's womb. In Australia, however, marsupial predators kept hunting. Among the most spectacular of them was the marsupial lion, a carnivore of the first order that used its lower incisors as lethal stabbing devices against a whole smorgasbord of prey. Giant herbivorous kangaroos, giant wombats, and lots of other delicious marsupials. Most amazingly, these animals did not die out until some 30,000 years ago, a split second in the Earth's history. By then, Aboriginal peoples were in Australia, so human beings must have come into contact with teeth like these.
That could cut a leg off a kangaroo
It probably wasn't a pleasant experience. Other Australian predators hung on. The marsupial wolf, also called the Tasmanian tiger, became extinct in captivity in 1936.
This program is brought to you in part by the world's most popular ATVs, Honda.
It's about passing time. So much time, it's unimaginable. And about the changes time inevitably brings. The great predators of the prehistoric world have been buried under those changes. And yet, because of their size or speed, strength or intelligence, they fascinate us still. We look back at them in awe, imaginations fired. We wonder, what if they were still here? What would the world be like if they were? Who knows? But just thinking about it keeps these hunters alive, even if all that is left are fossils.
A series of islands.
It's human nature to hope for the best, but when terrible things happen, the first question always asked is, why?
Since we cannot learn to live together, then we're going to have to learn to live together in small areas such as the islands. And maybe when we learn to live together better in peace, then we'll get this landmass to come back to us.
John claims spirits speak to everyone, but most fail to listen.
There will always be warnings to every major change that is coming. The best protection is to move anywhere up into the mountains and across into most of Texas, most of Montana. I would stay away from the plain states where they had the great floods last year. I would stay out of the Dakotas in the central section because I strongly feel that lakes will form up in that area.
John contends the warnings of the spirits are conditional. If we pay attention, tragedy could be avoided.
If you live in those areas and you see these changes coming, then take the hint and get out and move to safer areas. Because if I'm right, you could be lost. If I'm not right, then you have nothing to worry about.
Scattered across the villages of Central America, a race of prophets has existed for over 2,000 years. Their predictions seem to have been strangely accurate. They have seen our generation of mankind hurtling to what may be catastrophe. Reportedly, their calendar marks the precise day of our destruction. The end of time is near, says the ancient wisdom of the Mayans. Anthropologist Barbara Tedlock.
On December 21st, which is the winter solstice in the year 2012, the Maya have prophesied in their books that go back to the 1st century BC that there will be a change, a very large change. We will enter the 5th age.
The 5th age may mark the end of history. It's the final cycle of a pattern the Mayans believe is repeated throughout the eons and terminates in the year 2012. Anthropologist Dennis Tedlock.
What happens in each of the Maya creations and destructions of the world is that lots of the beings that belong to the previous world survive. They go on living, and they serve as a sign to the next people who come along of what happened to those who forgot the calendar.
The Mayan calendar is rooted in historical events. As each cycle of time repeats, happenings of the past serve as omens of the future. Author Scott Peterson.
Calendar priests would record the important events of their time on long books made of papyrus. That was the way that they could then predict what would happen, let's say 400 years in the future. They would look at what happened 400 years in the past and use that as a guide to the future.
The Mayans practiced an ancient form of astrology, using birth dates to guide their entire lives.
If you were born on a certain day, that would be your fate. If you were born on a day that said you were a doctor, then you were a doctor. If you were born on a day that said you were a thief, then you were a thief.
Mayan prophecy has foreseen not only the fates of individuals, but great events of mankind. Their sacred writings may have warned of a conquering army that would invade from a far-off land. Professor of Anthropology David Friedel.
There were events going on at the time the Spanish were first exploring Mexico that would lead one to believe that, in fact, prophecy was being realized. The predictions and prophecies in the Chilam Balam speak of the end of the Maya time and the beginning of the time of the foreigners.
Those foreigners committed the great sin that eventually destroyed each cycle of Mayan history, the sin of arrogance.
The Mayans believed everything is sacred. When you don't recognize that everything is holy and everything is sacred, then you lose track of your own place in the scheme of things. When nature and human beings go out of balance, ultimately nature will right the balance. It's the planet itself which is more powerful than the people.
In each Mayan apocalypse, man is punished for the harm he's inflicted on Mother Earth. In making tools and artifacts, the heat and hammering caused pain to the iron and clay, pain that had to be avenged. This holds true for a mythological race ruled the Earth long ago.
They looked on the surface very much like ourselves. They grew crops, they had domestic animals. But their heads were really quite empty. They did not remember to say prayers and make offerings. They did not respect the earth.
According to legend, the Mayan prophecy of doom was fulfilled. Mother Earth and her children sought revenge. Tools turned on their creators, and this world erupted in destruction.
Everything the people had made, all of human technology, and that included their domestic animals, rose up against them. Their dogs now talked to them. Their turkeys now talked to them and lectured them about what they'd been failing to do.
The wind roared with fury. There was no escape.
And the earth rose up against them, and their houses caved in on them.
Mayans believe that our fate is sealed. The next cycle will end in the year 2012, and then we too will suffer for mistreating nature. But instead of facing primitive tools, our enemy will be technology. After the final moments of calm, our peaceful world may end.
If you've ever worried about all those things you've got plugged in your house, all those things that are on the power grid that plugs into everything, that food processor in your kitchen, your answering machine, and your fax, and your VCR, your television, your clock radio. Imagine all of them getting a mind of their own and deciding they don't like you. So the time then to worry about all of these things happening is December 21st, the winter solstice in 2012. According to the Maya prophecies, that were written in the 1st century BC. Cats and dogs and caged birds, all of these would come after us. All of them would start talking to us. All of them would turn to attack us. In the previous disaster, it was just tortilla griddles, stone griddles, and a fart. Now it could be your waffle iron flying in your face. You're putting stuff into your food processor, and the first thing you know, it's processing you. You're a fax machine. You're feeding stuff into it, and the next thing you know, your tie is caught in it. Those are the kinds of things that could happen when everything we've made gets a mind of its own.
Some consider the ancient Mayan calendar the most accurate ever devised. And unlike ours, which concentrates on holidays and phases of the moon from here to eternity, the Mayan calendar has a final date. December the 21st in the year 2012. A day that just might be the last day of our world. Locked inside the human brain may be a time machine. For many years, therapists have used hypnosis to allow patients to visit the past. Reportedly, some of them have spoken in long-lost ancient tongues or dredged up names and events that have lain forgotten for hundreds of years. Well, if it's possible to travel backwards through past life regression, why shouldn't the future be within our reach? In the course of hypnotherapy, doctors chanced upon a stunning phenomenon. Human minds can not only return to the past, but seem to leap into the future. Over 5 years, Dr. Chet Snow and his colleagues recorded what they believe are the future life experiences of 2,800 patients under hypnosis. Strangely, according to Snow, these apparent time travelers reported nearly identical experiences. Most journeyed to the 22nd century, and they shared only 4 visions of our future. Some saw mankind living in orbiting space colonies above the Earth. Others envisioned small creative communities near the sea, or agricultural communities in remote settings. Still others glimpsed a highly technological future.
They're going to eat us.
Dr. Snow and his patient, Laura Byerly, allowed us the rare opportunity to witness an actual progression therapy session. Okay. Laura's journey could reveal a picture of her future, and maybe ours.
It's not a party game or a parlor trick that one should do. I think any work with hypnosis is sort of like taking a scalpel. In the hands of a surgeon, a scalpel can do wonderful things. In the hand of a serial killer, it can do horror. I'm going to count slowly from 1 to 5. And as I count, the cloud will take you to just the right place, where it will bring you back down into a new body, another physical form.
Dr. Snow monitors Laura with infinite care, keenly aware that manipulating the psyche is a highly delicate procedure.
Now, what's happened?
Reading to students.
All right. Mm-hmm. And tell me anything about the classroom or the place where the students are. How many students are there?
30.
Mm-hmm. How old are your students, would you say?
12, 13.
I see. And what are they wearing?
Jeans, dresses.
Okay. Can you find a calendar? Look at it and see. What year does it say?
1966 or 7.
All right. So now we're in this life still, in this body.
Laura crossed the fine line between progression and regression, accidentally jumping back in time. Dr. Snow presses her to reverse course into the future.
They will take you forward to the future. They will take you at least 1 century or 2 centuries from the date that we called 1994. 1 or 2 centuries.
Propelled by the power of hypnosis into the 22nd century, Laura has no control over her journey.
She could return to the physical world as anyone or anything.
5, you're alive. Alive in the physical body, in the life, in the time period you've chosen. Look down at your feet. Become vividly aware of the feet there, your feet in that body and time. Take your arms and of the future body and hug your torso a moment. Become vividly aware of your size and the shape of that body. And as you hug the torso, you will know, are you a man or woman in that body?
I just felt like there was a man's body.
Yes, a man's body, right?
I was aware of shoulders and things like that.
Right, fairly broad-shouldered. Good. Now, you said something about there were some buildings you could see. As you come up toward it, describe anything about it to me. Is this a dwelling or is it some other kind of building?
I guess it's a dwelling.
All right. And tell me anything about it. What is the roof shaped like?
Pointed.
Dr. Snow urges Laura to go further, to examine her future living quarters.
Find a place where you sleep.
Okay.
What is it like? Anything about it?
It doesn't feel like a private place.
No? Okay. Is there like a communal type of place?
Must be.
Okay.
Hundreds of the time travelers studied by Dr. Snow described a future eerily similar to Laura's vision.
She talked about many people living in the same set of apartments. And this also is very typical of the high-tech kind of environment people. And look at the place where you eat. How many places are set?
3.
And become vividly aware as you... Do you sit down to eat?
Not really.
Okay, how do you eat?
Standing.
All right.
Laura labors to understand mysterious details.
Move forward until you're at a moment when at least one of them is in the room. Which one came into the room?
I guess a female.
Does she seem also in her 20s or is she older or younger?
Younger.
Okay.
Dr. Snow encourages her to probe further, experiencing her future life at different ages.
What happens if you go forward until you're about 43? Let me count 3. 1, 2, 3. Now, what is it you're doing now?
I suppose something with computers.
Do you push, punch, pull? What do you do? What do your hands do?
Maybe just raise above them.
She saw herself putting her hands over a machine and getting information directly from the machine without having to tap in keys or use words, and this is very typical of the high-tech people.
Laura's journey indicates that some human rituals are unchanged in the 22nd century.
Now, go ahead and describe to me anything about this event. What is happening? What's going on? What seems to be going on?
Weddings.
Which one is the one that interests you?
The girl.
Okay. Tell me anything about her that stands out. Is it a daughter of yours?
Dr. Snow now prods her to experience the greatest mystery of all.
I want you to move into the very last day you live in that life. It's before you leave consciousness, before you leave the physical body. To move into that last day and look down at your hands. What do your hands look like now?
Older.
All right. Are you sitting, lying, or standing up?
Lying.
Okay. Without any pain in your physical body, look and reflect for a moment. No pain is felt. What is it that's going on that's leading you to be in the last days of this lifetime?
It might just be my decision.
It's a decision, like a choice you're making?
It seems like there's a group of people and they all feel important.
All right. Now, I want you to take a breath and I let yourself release from the body. Now you're released from that body. You may float up above it. Float up above it and float high up through the roof.
By the 22nd century, death has become a peaceful process. But research points to our near future as a stark and lonely time.
Through all of our subjects, one of the things that stood out was that 2100, which is one of the time periods we took them to, only 5 to less than 10% of our subjects recalled having a future lifetime in that period.
A world with fewer people, That is the vision shared by hundreds of Dr. Snow's patients. According to his research, the next 100 years may see a part of mankind vanish from the Earth.
A number of things that might happen to cause this. Epidemics, plagues, such as Nostradamus makes mention of, asteroid or another extraplanetary body coming into contact with the Earth, and that would cause a weather climatic change, like a pole shift. People were indicating that there would be a significant drop in population between now and the 22nd century.
If Dr. Snow's findings are correct, soon the only dwellers of our great cities may be memories.
When we picture a prophet, a sage entrusted with the secrets of human destiny, the image that comes to mind is that of an old man with a flowing white beard, seated in a candle-lit room reading from an ancient manuscript. In the real world, a prophet can be the neighbor next door. The Mayans have given it a date. December the 21st, 2012. From biblical writings comes the 3 days of darkness. Jules Verne made doomsday nothing more than science fiction, while John Runningdeer spells it out as plain as day. From visionaries to seers, the warnings are coming together like the pieces of a terrible puzzle. Many are listening to these warnings, and more are preparing. But no prophecy is without hope. For almost every prediction of disaster and destruction comes the promise of renewal and rebirth. And ultimately, we are the creators of our own future by the choices we exercise today. We, you and I, are the masters of our destiny.